What's up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. Today, I want to talk to you guys about baseline specificity and how this is going to vary from individual to individual. Now, when I say baseline specificity, I'm simply referring to how conspecific you can be year-round when it comes to the big three. So, the bench, squat, and the deadlift. Now, the reason why this is important is because I've already done videos, right? And I'll even have one link in the description down below about what I think people get wrong about the off-season. In terms of I think a lot of people will get mindless with their variations. They program variations post-meet just because they think they're supposed to, or it's like, oh, it's off-season, so, it's got to be a bunch of crazy high reps, nothing conspecific, give my body a break, all that kind of stuff, right? And while there can't be some truth to that as far as maybe you psychologically need a break for whatever reason, the reality is you want to be as conspecific as what you can be year-round, right? If you're trying to get better at the big three in terms of powerlifting, bench, squat, and deadlift, and you want to practice those movements, bench, squat, and deadlift, as often as you can, due to skill retention, as well as the fact that you want to practice how you play, right? So that's why I tell people, if you're going to do a variation, it needs to be usually for one of three reasons. The first one being that it's a variation that's actually going to cause you to work on something functionally within the big three that you need to really work on. Maybe you have issue keeping tension on your chest with the bench press, so you do long pause bench pressing, for example. Two, it can simply be due to the fact that you can only be so conspecific at any given point in time, right? Maybe the last 8 weeks of your meet prep going into a meet, you can low bar squat 3 times, no problem, and you feel fine. But when you try to go much longer than 8 weeks, you start to feel too beat up, so you switch out one of your low bar days for high bar, for SSB, something of that nature. That's very common, right? Based upon how you're built. And then the third reason, once again, is just psychologically. If somebody does need a little bit of a break from being hyper specific, then taking a little bit of a break for a block or two can be really good for just getting somebody rewired and feeling good and ready to hit the ground running when you do get them a little bit more conspecific. So if you're not really doing one of those three things, then putting a variation, it doesn't necessarily make sense. It shouldn't be just because, as I tell you guys all the time, you want to have a why for everything that you're doing. But when I'm talking about baseline specificity, it's understanding that whether we're talking about you're in meet prep or you're off season, based upon your build, your morphology, and how well you can recover from certain things, you're only ever going to be able to be so comp specific, right? And this is something we have to consider when we're talking about total workload being done on a muscle group as well, right? There's a big difference between somebody who's built super well to squat, so they're able to push way more squat volume across their 2 or 3 days a week that they squat, and thus kind of get a good baseline of volume that they need on their legs from squatting, versus somebody where you're kind of, only able to do so much squat volume before due to how you're built, your core gives out on you, or your back gives out on you, to where you can't push your legs the way you want to. Maybe you're someone like me where you have longer femurs, so you have to push your leg accessory a lot more, right? Because there's going to be a difference in how those two people approach things. If you are built super well to squat, then there's not a reason for you to take this more minimalistic approach with your squat volume and then just blast your legs with, say, belt squat, leg extensions, leg press, right? You can add that stuff in as needed. But for example, somebody like Russell Orhe, he's somebody where, due to how he's built and the amount of volume he's able to do on his squats, you'll notice, if any of you were subscribed to his YouTube channel, he doesn't do as much lower body accessory work as what a lot of the rest of us do, because he simply doesn't have a need to. And if he does do some stuff for his hamstrings or a little bit of additional quad work, he's not going to need to do anywhere near as much as a lot of us, because he gets so much from his squat volume already, right? Whereas for the rest of us, we're doing just enough squat volume to have that skill retention and try to gradually, practice being under heavier loads with the movement, but we can only do so much volume on it. You're probably gonna have to push, belt squat more, maybe 2-3 times a week, right? And that's not to say there's not a benefit to going harder on accessories, even if you are built well for a lift, but it's all about, once again, that baseline specificity. How specific can you be? There seems to still, in some scopes of powerlifting, be this mindset that, overuse isn't a real thing, right? It's all about just load management, volume dosage, and stuff like that. And of course that's true to a degree, right? But the idea that that one way of getting a certain type of volume might not beat you up as another way is just completely untrue. If you're somebody where you're not built as well for a certain lift, right? So you can get that same total kind of volume that you need for growth through, maybe some variation work or pushing your accessories more, that's probably going to be a smarter move for you long term, and it's going to beat you up way less than if you just try to force more sets of squat or bench or deadlift, whatever it may be, right? Using myself as an example, you guys, if you've been keeping up with the channel, you know that at this point, as far as my deadlifts, I work up to my top set on my primary deadlift day, whether it's a top single, double, triple, whatever it may be, and then I don't do any back down volume on that day. Then on my secondary deadlift day, I push RDLs. That's it. I've played with, like, you know, having back down volume on my conventional deadlift. I've even played with conventional deadlift twice a week or some type of variation on the secondary day, whether it's pause deadlifts or light percentage based deadlifts, which is something that I'll still do when I'm like closer to a meet. But as far as like for long periods of time, I've tried that. And even though the point in time when I was deadlifting twice a week with, like, you know, an RPE based, say, single one day, RPE based triple another day with back down volume on both days, even though that did help me like get really technically efficient and get really strong and blow my deadlift up relatively quickly, it got to this point where I could not maintain that because I was starting to have a whole lot of discomfort with my back and get way too fatigued too often. Because for me, due to how I'm built, even though I have relatively long arms, because I have such long legs and how my hips insert, getting in that position over and over and over just didn't feel good for me. And it's hard for me to maintain that, right? So, you know, the mindset could be like, okay, well then do RDLs on the secondary day, but maybe still do back down volume on your primary deadlift day. But at this point, and due to, like, you know, just where my overall strength is at and volume is collectively across all the movements, for me, it's far more beneficial to focus on, okay, pushing my squat volume, hit what I need to for my top set on deadlifts, and then making up for the back down volume with, say, like belt squat, leg press, upper backward, pushing those accessories more makes sense, because if I'm able to get in that, like, the same stimulus I need in terms of workload and volume through those accessories, but it beats me up less than if I tried to get, you know, a baseline of that workload from doing back down sets and then doing some extra accessories, well, why would I go with the option that's going to beat me up more when I have these alternatives, right? When I can do enough workload. And that's what I did, you know, after that last back tweak that I had back in, what was it, like June of 2020. From that point on, and you guys saw how well it worked going into my last meet this past February, as far as like just pushing a top set on deadlift, making sure I'm like progressing load intensity based upon exertion, pushing my RDLs, and then just pushing my lower body and my upper back accessory work. That was all I needed to do. Keep in mind, guys, at the end of the day, once your technique is locked in, the most important factor for you to continue to get stronger is going to be putting on muscle mass. So if you're able to put on that muscle mass through being more comp specific because you're built super well for a lift and you can put a certain amount of volume on that, then by all means, I think you should do that, because you're just going to get a little bit more practice. And then whatever you need as far as accessory work to make up the difference, go for it. That's cool. But if you're someone like me where maybe you're not as built as well for certain lifts, and you know you're going to get more beat up if you try to push a certain amount of volume, then just do the baseline amount of volume that you need to you know, maintain your fitness and efficiency of technique on the big three. And then from there, push your volume through accessory work. Because at the end of the day, so long as you're building muscle and you're doing enough work on the movements to keep your technique locked in, you're going to get stronger, especially for something like the deadlift, especially if you're a conventional puller, which is like, you know, a simpler movement than sumo. Like sumo, you might want to have a little bit more practice. And by all means, I'm not telling all of you like, hey, just ditch your back down volume on deadlifts. It's very circumstantial based upon the individual, your morphology. But what I am saying is that I don't feel like my deadlift has suffered from pulling out any type of back down volume work. I feel like it's actually gotten a lot better because the quality of what I'm able to do on my top set of deadlifts is a lot better. The quality of what I'm able to do with my squats is now a lot better. And it's like, it's a cycle because I can push my squats more. That's having really good carryover to my deadlift as well. And I'm able to, like I said, make up the difference with my accessories. Just the fact that whereas somebody, like I said, like maybe like Russell, or even my client Ashton, where, you know, they only have to do so much lower body accessory, if any. I also have to push my lower body accessories a lot more. But I'm okay with that because it feels healthier for me, right? So that's the thing. When it comes to overuse, right? Like, yes, load management comes into play and stuff like that. But it's the fact that you can only manage your load so much. If it's this thing where like, oh, it's about load management, it's okay, I'm gonna comp squat 3 times a week, but just go super, super light on that third comp squat day, you have to start asking yourself, well, is it even worth doing at that point? When I can instead maybe do a variation like high bar SSB and push it that much more, right? Compared to like just super scaling it with a third comp specific day. Or maybe, hey, don't squat on that day at all. Maybe just push more volume on belt squats, leg press. You have to ask yourself these questions. Because it's all about cost, right? With everything we do in powerlifting, there's a cost to everything we do, and you always have to ask, okay, is the cost of what I'm doing worth it? Is it yielding the results I want at the rate that I want? If not, then you might want to consider pulling back and evaluating your options, right? And once again, this is going to be different for everybody. I cannot express enough that I do believe you should be as comp specific as you can be year round. If you're somebody where you can comp squat twice a week all year round with no issues, great. But if you're somebody where, like, you know, you find that just beats you up more compared to if you maybe comp squat one day, like with low bar, and then high bar another day, go for it. And sometimes it won't even be based upon how you're built. It can be based upon just objective workload. Once again, use my client Ashton as an example. Due to just the objective loads he is able to put out, right? If we had him low bar squat twice a week, he would feel far more fatigued and far more beat up a lot faster. But since we have him do low bar on his primary day and high bar on his secondary day, we're able to push more and progress more in a way that's not going to beat him up as much. Mind you, his high bar is still very strong. He's still putting up some pretty big objective loads, but it's just not quite as heavy as would it be if we had him do low bar for the same reps at the same RPE. And at the end of the day, it's not what you can do, guys. It's what you can adequately recover from. So when you look at like what you're doing programming wise, you have to ask yourself, like, not does this just look good on paper, does it make sense on paper, but does this make sense from a standpoint of how well you're able to efficiently recover? If it does, great, keep doing what you're doing. But if not, and you keep running into these walls and stalls where you're feeling more beat up way more often than you should, and mind you, there's always gonna be fatigue, that's part of what we do, but if you're feeling more beat up more often than what you should, then you need to evaluate why that might be. And I think a lot of people's answers is just do something less, and that's great, but if there's a way you can make up for what you pulled out, you should always try to do that. And I feel like the issue is a lot of people feel like it has to be all or nothing. They feel like they have to be super conspecific all the time, or, oh, this beats me up a little bit, so I'm just gonna go super mad variation instead of finding that balance of it, having a why behind everything you're doing. Like, once again, if you can comp squat twice a week, cool. If you can comp squat 3 times a week and you find that's beneficial for you, cool. If you can only comp squat twice a week and need like a variation on that third day, awesome. If you're somebody where you find you're better off just squatting twice a week, period, so you're gonna make them both conspecific, awesome. If you're squatting twice a week, but you realize even then, being conspecific both those days beats you up, all right, switch it out for something else. And it's all about problem solving and critically thinking about this type of stuff. That it doesn't have to be like just all in on one or the other. But I feel like the more, you know, as we get more people getting involved in powerlifting and the gene pool, like, you know, is growing, yes, we're finding a lot more freaks and stuff like that who are built super well to do this and just their strength blows up quickly, but you're also going to find more people who maybe aren't built as optimally for this as what you would expect, right? And those individuals are going to have to find ways to kind of work around their weaknesses a little bit more. And that's something that I try to, you know, express to you guys and show you guys how I've done that for myself when it comes to lifting, right? So yeah, I just wanted to kind of get into this and break this down because it's something where I feel like people still seem to like be too far one way or the other as far as like how they feel about specificity and their variation work. Do variation work on an as-need basis, but understand for some people that's going to be a lot more than others. And this, you know, if you get that, you know, fully down and you understand that, you find that perfect balance for you as an individual, regardless if you have a friend who can, you know, comp squat 3 times a week or comp bench 5 times a week, or if you have a friend who can only do each thing once a week, regardless, when you find that perfect balance for you, you're going to find that your progression is a whole lot better. So yeah, that's it for the video. Just wanted to break all that down. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go in the comment down below, let me know what you did. If you're not, leave a comment down below, let me know what can be better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch you guys later.